do you justify that within, like,
I want to punch Bud in the
brewer's
nose.
mind? That
I want to punch Bud in the nose. That's why it was hilarious when they got bought by AB in November. I texted him. I was like, hey, man, what the hell, Miller to Bud? And he was like, oh, shut up, man, you're an asshole. Whatever. There's a slight stigma around drinking typical domestics. Yeah. And it's typically actually amongst the white, I'd call them the salmon pant wearing crowd. Like, they wear the very top side of salmon pants. So they bring.
Bobby says what he wants, how he wants, when he wants, and how much he wants, resulting in a special 2-part episode of Back Pew Brewing. Part 2, Big Beer versus Craft Beer. Welcome to Stout Conversations, where every week we sit down with creative thinkers in the craft beer industry and beyond. Your hosts, Ken and April, live and work in a 24-foot RV, traveling the country in search of great stories around a great beer. While big corporations such as AB InBev and Miller Coors still have quite the hold on America's beer drinkers, craft breweries like Back Pew Brewing in Porter, Texas, just outside of Houston, knows how to hold its own in the fellowship of differing opinions. Brew Master and Owner, Bobby Harl, takes the pulpit in this intriguing episode on society's roles and marketing tactics within big beer versus craft beer.
Right,
so
once you get to a certain
what is,
level.
like, the best or coolest thing about being a brewer and a brewery owner?
You get a lot of free beer, which is nice, and that's what I like. I mean, not even just mine. Like, a lot of times somebody's like, "Hey, dude, you got to try that." Fuck, all right, cool.
Okay.
My favorite beer is free beer, so I'm like, all right, awesome.
So
But-
wait.
Go ahead. Yeah.
So what's the worst thing about owning a brewery or being a brewer, or whichever way you want to answer that?
I mean, owning a brewery, that what people don't realize is, when you see it, and one thing that's kind of, it's not necessarily a misnomer, so this is going to sound negative, but it's not. It looks quite glorious.
We've heard that many
and it's not.
the
But you
rockstar
want
lifestyle, man.
people to have it look awesome, because that's why they come out to hang out with us. And I mean, and I don't say that because I'm like miserable all the time. I say that because it's a business, and it doesn't have margins. It's now a highly competitive space. You're constantly outperformed by your competitors from a marketing standpoint. I mean, Bud, Miller, and Coors have more money than we can dream of having, that they spend on ad campaigns, and they control 80% of the market. It's a very difficult business, because the rest of us brewers who have like 22% or something we've grown to, we're all fighting in this kind of little sphere, and while they bitch about losing space, we're slowing down in terms of how much market share we're taking. And so, they're starting to realize, I think, like, look, we're going to have this bubble. And here's what I see. I see there's this giant bubble of people drinking a lot of beer. And that's the vast majority of the beer drank in the U.S. And there's this huge wall built around it by Miller, Coors, Bud. Now the Mexican lagers have gotten into it. So it's basically Heineken, because Heineken owns pretty much all the Mexican lagers now, about how they control, like, we want these guys to keep drinking our products. And if you've ever had a side-by-side test with all those products, they basically taste the same. Miller, Bud, Coors, those are the light beers. But those over here, all the Mexican lagers, I was wanting to develop one because we have, people have asked us for a Mexican lager. And so I said, okay, let's go try them. And I remember loving Modelo and Pacifico and how much better those beers were. Well, when I went and got 6 of them and tasted them side by side, they're all basically the same. When I look at the label, they're all basically made by Heineken, coming from the same plant. Makes a lot of sense, but in my memory, I really enjoyed Modelo and Pacifico. I'd still rather drink those than, say, Corona or Dos Equis or something. But it was interesting as to how across the board they were when you really sit, clean palate, kind of go through the beers.
There's really not a ton of difference?
There's really not. I challenge you to, when you're, because like that's what I remember in my mindset. I was like, no, Pacifico's way better. And I was thinking it's maltier. That when you sit and really clean palate test them one by one, and we did Modelo, Pacifico. We went ahead and got a Corona just for the sake of completeness. Dos Equis, Sol, and I can't remember what the 6th one was. It was a mixed 6. I think maybe Tecate, but they were very similar, and they're all hitting a certain palate, is what I realized. Okay. And they're hitting something that's light, easy to drink, doesn't fill you up. All of these things that those drinkers typically go for are in all of those products. And when I think about why they're on the growth trend, especially Mexican lagers, is that there is a stigma, not brought about whether it be craft brewers or whoever, there's a slight stigma around drinking typical domestics. Yeah. And it's typically actually amongst the white, I'd call them the salmon pant wearing crowd. Like, they wear the very top side of salmon pants. So they brought an import.
Right.
Sort
so
of.
They feel like they're.
Well, it's different. It's not just bringing a case of Miller Lite, which they probably wanted to bring, but they brought a case of Dos Equis. It's a brand. It's like, what's that stupid shirt with the little whale on it? What the fuck is that? I don't know what that is, but it's apparently really popular. It costs a lot of money. It's still a T-shirt. It's just a T-shirt. It's just a T-shirt. But that's, I mean, that is marketing. That is branding to a T, and it works for a very large population of beer drinkers. And then we're over here with this 20%, and our bubble is highly diversified.
And you're saying craft beer in general, 20%.
Yeah, 20%. I just rounded. I think it might be like 22, but just those crazier numbers.
Yeah.
The bummer is you have a hugely large number of growing people competing for these drinkers, whereas over here you do not. So big bubble, not huge competition other than just between themselves. Little bubble, shit ton of new entrants, shit ton of new different drinkings. All these different things are happening inside this little bubble. The craft beer trends that are occurring, hazy IPAs, fruited this, that, the other. I want something new all the time. Very, very difficult to catch up with as a production style brewery where you're not going to just be putting out something new every week. And you might be able to do it at the Taproom, but you're not going to put it out in mass that way. It's very, very difficult unless you get to a certain scale, right? So when you think about who you're trying to get, there's a lot of people spending a lot of money on booze right over here. So how do you get through that wall that's heavily protected by those guys? And there's a lot of debate about that. I think what you're going to see right now is that you're going to see a lot of guys coming out with light beers, low-carb beers, low-calorie beers. This is my opinion, and this is why I'm getting to this, is I think what they're missing is that those drinkers do want those things, but they also want something that none of us care to talk about, and that's they want absolutely no flavor. They want water.
God.
So you'll see that we just put on Back Pew Ultra. We're going to go over there and get them.
Back Pew Ultra?
Back Pew Ultra. And we're going to go after the Michelob Ultra drinkers. They're the fastest growing brand.
I was going to throw that out there, but I wasn't sure if I should.
Michelob Ultra is the fastest growing brand in the U.S.
Really?
It's up 34% for the year.
That's funny you say that. We were at a Walmart, and I saw Michelob Ultra there, and they have Michelob Ultra Lime Cactus.
It's apparently very popular.
And I'm like,
yes, it's a huge deal.
What the hell is this?
It's a
Lime
big
Cactus?
Deal. It's a big deal. Because we've been doing a lot of market research about this. And so it doesn't make sense to us. But if you drink one, just because I've been flavor matching, I was like, this is pointless. There's no reason to drink this.
So how do you justify that within
I want to punch Bud in the nose.
brewer's mind? That
I want to punch Bud in the nose.
How much of that craft beer, say, like we're using round numbers, craft beer is roughly 20%, big beers 80%. How much of that, how much bigger would that 20% be if say AB InBev wasn't buying up so many craft beers?
I mean, it'd be hard to it would be hard to say because what those guys would do independently, you just don't know. Would they start to suffer the same thing?
Do we know what AB InBev is doing with those craft brewers?
They're growing like crazy.
So those craft
Carbach's
brewers.
going nuts.
And yeah, you've got Carbach and we're from Colorado, Breckenridge.
I don't know how those guys are doing.
I don't know if Breckenridge is getting bigger or not.
Some are working, some are not. Is my understanding. I talked to the guys at Carbach.
Some of that should spill over because us geeks, we know, we get it. We get AB InBev when they're the enemy and to a lot of us, but there's a lot of people out there drinking craft beer that has been bought by AB InBev, so it's not technically craft beer anymore. But they don't know that. They think they're drinking craft beer, or they're drinking something different.
Yeah.
Like you said, some people say the Mexican lagers are different. Same thing with Breckenridge or Carbach. People think they're drinking a craft beer.
Well, and they want you to.
Or just something.
And they want you to, and this is the weird conundrum about a lot of those guys. If they're still making great beer, you should drink it. But there are cases, Goose Island's an excellent case in point, where when they get their hands on it, they turn it into shit. Depending upon the acquisition, how it's laid out, you can taste it. You'll either taste it or you will not. So when you talk to the Goose Island guys, when they got bought, they had the barrel aging program and everything else, and they kept those guys and they said, here, you guys have that. Like Bourbon County, stuff like that. Awesome. And so that was there. We're taking 312 wheat and IPA and all that stuff. We're going to go brew it over here, and there ain't shit you can do about it. And they thinned it out, they knocked down the hops, they did all of that thing to make it a more classic, just mass production style product. And not too long after, people quit drinking it if you were in the craft beer because it didn't taste that good. Maybe AB InBev or not, you're like, this isn't as good as it used to be for whatever reason. And that's why. Now, with Carbach, I can just tell you because of what I know about them, it has not turned out that way. First of all, they already had a 100-barrel brew house, so they can make a shit ton of beer.
Right.
Second of all, because of the production just knowledge of the guys who work there, and a lot of them, it's funny, so Chris Jurgen, who's the head of operations, good buddy of mine, lives in Kingwood. The January before they sold in November, he moved from he's a UC Davis grad, brewing. He was working at Miller in Dallas. And then he said, I want to go back down to a craft brewery. So he got hired on there because they were just opening their 100-barrel brew house. So to him, he was going from 1,000 to 100 barrels. He was getting smaller. Most craft guys are like, 100-barrel brew house, what the hell would I do with that? That's so much beer. And so, but he knows all of those ops things. So he gets smaller. And that's why it was hilarious when they got bought by AB in November. I texted him, I was like, hey, man, what the hell, Miller to Bud? And he was like, oh, shut up, man, you're an asshole. But, the product in particular, Love Street, which was their flagship, they are brewing a portion of it at the I-10 Bud plant. But that's because Jurgen can walk into that 500-barrel brew house and know exactly what that looks like. A lot of craft brewers, that's a very difficult thing because it's not just the same thing but bigger. It is to a degree, but usually there's extra technology in there that we don't usually get to play with, and so a lot of people don't know about it or how to really use it. And so that's a unique case where they could take one product to the large-scale manufacturing plant and make it identical to what they were making on the 100-barrel brew house. Hopadillo, on the other hand, which is their second best product, which is their IPA, will never be brewed at the big plant because they can't process that kinds of hops.
Really?
Those brew houses are meant for efficiency. Hops inherently are inefficient.
Like that.
But I'm just saying, so it's inherently a weird thing because now you think back to the Goose Island example, the Hake 312 IPA. Well, why does it taste worse now? It's not an IPA anymore. They can't process that massive amounts of hops to do probably what those guys were doing on their scale to match that, to flavor match. Well, however Carbach sold, Chris Jurgen is the one who gets to say whether or not the batch flavor matches. And I remember specifically, he was here one night, we were having a beer, he's like, man, brewed the first batch of Love Street, 1,200 barrels, tasted it, sucked, dumped it. So brewed the second batch, pretty close, tasted it, didn't work, dumped it. I was like, Jurgen, I'm making 2,400 barrels this year. You dumped more beer than I made this year. But that's the reality of being a bigger guy, is that you make that much product. And so it's kind of amazing when that happens. But I think that's one thing. The next thing is people who really know and care will really know and care. Everybody else doesn't give a shit. Because if you think that the vast majority of people who are looking for a lower carb version of Corona, because apparently that's necessary, it already is terrible. You're taking all just more terribleness out of it, I guess. I don't know. But that's what they're looking for. Now they think that they've got a craft beer. So when they're looking at it, it's a brand on a shelf. It's not who owns what. They don't care. They want beer. It's more of the idea of having fun. If you look at those marketing campaigns, that wall around that 80%, they're not buying it probably because they like drinking beer. They're doing it because it's a habit. They're doing it because their dad drank that brand. They're doing it because they think it'll make them skinny or make them in shape because Lance Armstrong was behind. Well, I'm just saying, think about all the things that they're buying it for. They're not buying it because they want to drink a great beer. Right. They're buying it for a lot of other reasons. And those reasons overwhelm you more so than I'm worried who owns this. Now, when you get down to the nitty-gritty with craft beer people, absolutely. You start to maybe think about that, who knows what, but hey, with my wholesaler happens to distribute Miller. When I signed with them, they're like, well, you got bought out by Miller? I was like, yeah, that's why I'm not riding around in a really nice fucking truck right now. No, I didn't get bought out by Miller. I'm on the same truck. Distributors are not owned by them, despite the fact in their minds they kind of think they are. I was not bought by Miller. That'd be a very different transaction. I'm simply on the same truck that Miller distributes on because there's only so many distributors, and you got to pick one. A lot of guys run the Bud truck. You think all those guys got bought out by Bud? No, the only one was Carbach.
You obviously are very highly opinionated, and I think that's nothing wrong with that, but what would your definition of a craft beer be?
Good question.
I mean, there's a lot of talk about it with the Brewing Association. They have like a lot of things, nano craft, like craft or micro and all that. I was like, look.
Right, and they go by barrels.
Yeah, it's mostly a barrelage thing. Like Sam Adams is not considered a craft brewery or anything anymore, and that pissed off him. And I was like, dude, you're not. You're on the stock exchange. Like you've succeeded. Just calm down and move on. So craft beer bars wanting to support smaller local guys are going to do that. You have made it. You don't really need to be in there. Plus, your flavor palate has changed because you're starting to brew for the masses, so you can taste it compared to what they used to brew. Just drink it. I know you don't think so, but the beer that ends up in my shelf tastes like that.
Well, and there's a lot of craft brewers out there that are nationwide that I tend to steer away from a little bit because I think and a lot of them still make really good beer in their tap room.
Sure.
Their small batch stuff. But I don't want to drink a lot of their nationwide stuff because it's like, it's good, but it's not my good.
I still want to hear his answer.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So a craft brewery, I mean, I would say that to define a craft brewery would be independently owned. Not investment banking. I mean, that's essentially funded, but they're not the driving factor behind putting it together. I really think you have to have somebody with some vision, maybe some passion behind it is really what would make a craft brewery. They've got their own culture, they've got their own beers, and that's why I define craft as people that really care.
Okay, so we're living a Stout Life. There's kind of a double-edged meaning, and beer, obviously, but also like a full, authentic, passionate life. So for you, what is your definition of living a Stout Life?
I mean, I think it's going to be different for each person. I'm a workaholic, and so the brewery has worked out well because I don't have a life much outside of it. But to me, that's fine. I'm good with that because it's going towards something all the time. That vision that I've got. Because every time you get somewhere, I'm always thinking of the 3 things that we could do next. And I think so for me that's awesome because I'm the master of my own destiny. Because I can, to a degree, obviously, at wholesalers, we're not going to get into all that damn trouble. But at the end of the day, it's there's a lot of times you can give up. But if it's something you want, you got to make it go work. There's going to be tons of shit that's going to be in the way. And there's a lot of times where you just go, screw it, like, why are we even bothering? But then you come back and say, no, this is why we're bothering. Just because it is tough. And so to me, that's what it would be. Figure out whatever that thing is that works for you and do it. If it's, if it's, going down, moving to Cozumel and just living out there and renting out surfboards, if that's what you want, go for it. It's possible. If you're just miserable doing whatever you're doing, have a reason for it, I guess. If you don't have no, it's just one of those things. People are like, well, I don't know why I'm doing this. It's like, then quit fucking doing it. Not being negative. There's reasons for everything. Now, some people, it's like, I have a job that I don't like. I make a lot of money doing it, and then I can do whatever I want on my vacations. You have the thing that you do. You have your thing. That's awesome.
I want to say, so here's to don't be an asshole and do what you want.
That's right. Do what you want. Cheers, guys.
We have new conversations every week. Be sure to subscribe to Living a Stout Life so you don't miss out. What's your opinion? If you are a craft beer lover, is it blasphemy to enjoy a beverage from a big beer maker? Let us know in the comments below.
Now, obviously, it's a fully production facility, which is awesome because I knew I had to get people out of here before I got the canning line because now you don't come in here because people just have this weird tendency to want to touch everything, and I don't know why. I'm like, that's not yours. Just leave it alone.
Like
you touching it can do nothing but hurt it. Just, I know you. They're like, oh, this is nice. Like, yeah, just quit fucking touching it. It's not because it's like I need to be clean, so I don't know where you've been. Like, it's kind of like barrels.
Yeah.
Barrels are one of the most dangerous things. They're fine when they're sitting there. Those bugs will not just transfer to anything else because of wind or anything else, but the thing that gets people is that when you touch a barrel, you now have whatever bugs were on that barrel in your hand. You'll go out your day, you don't realize it, you touch a tank, you touch this, I don't know you did it. Now I've got something from there to there. And so that's why barrels are inherently dangerous, especially when people are around them.
So that's why you have barrel rooms.
Typically at barrel rooms, you only keep people, a lot of times on tours, they'll be not when you're going after the clean facility, and then they'll take you into the barrel room, and then they're back in the tap room or something where you can't hurt anything. I would never take a tour through a barrel facility and then back into my clean facility. Usually that's kind of the last. Yeah. Now if there are people like brewers will do whichever organ because they'll know what the fuck they're doing. But like general tour, because people love to pat barrels, like, oh man, this is so cool. They rub it, and I'm like, that's not great. Now whiskey distilleries doesn't matter. There's too much alcohol for anything to grow. You're never going to hurt anything. Breweries is a little bit different.
So what size system do you have here?
We have a 30 barrel system. So our brew house, made in Wisconsin by Sprinkman, awesome brew house, 4-vessel system. I had to do that because of the German style beers. We do, I believe in decoction mashing. If you guys have any followers who are brewers, they will say, you don't need to decoct. The other guys will say, yes you do.
We do home brewing, but we've
never done decoction?
Definitely not done.
It's worth it. So what you're going for, the debate is that it doesn't add anything to flavor. And I said, okay, then why do you caramelize onions? Do they taste better or worse? No, they taste delicious. And you know why? Because you're caramelizing the sugar. Same idea when you're doing a decoction. Now, way back when you went through the different steps of mash, so do I think that you need that many? I actually disagree with the need to do like 3, 100 at acid rest, then protein rest, then this rest and that. you just don't need to because we have highly modified grains. But what we're really going for is the caramelization of the sugars. So that's going to be a length of the decoction, the amount you decoct. And so you're also going to the Maillard reaction, so you're going to darken it. So like blue is double decocted with with blue corn. So it has a lot of roundness to it, even being what otherwise theoretically would be a thin beer. But there's a lot of flavor just because of all that you've done with a very, very simple sugar and grain. You don't get that if you just mashed it and went through. I can tell you, I tried it. It just didn't work. Right. And again, you're not looking for extra modification. You're not looking for any of that. You're trying to take something that you have made, a simple sugar, off of starches from a very basic grain. We use Gerard Pils malt, great malt, highly diastatically active, and turn it into a beer that's going to taste really good. If I did that same beer without the decoction, it would be a lot thinner. It would be very singular. It wouldn't have the depth of flavor on the palate that you get from blue as it is today. Again, I've tested it, and so I am very much of the opinion that it doesn't happen. And me and Jurgen get into fights about this all the time. He's like, you have to decoct. I said, yes, you do. And then we drink another beer.
But if it worked the same way without decocting it, you
wouldn't
do it because
it takes a lot of time.
Too much time.
It takes a lot of time, a lot of energy. So
you could cut down your production time.
That's right.
And stuff, so it wouldn't make sense to do it if you didn't get a benefit.